Okay, today we will be in Chapter 1, Section 3, which is on fractions. As you can see from this course outline, which is located in your syllabus, we have 3 topic objectives to cover today. We are going to simplify fractions, learn to add, subtract, multiply, and divide fractions, and then learn how to change mixed numbers into fractions and vice versa. Okay, before we can delve into how to actually solve fractions, we need to understand a few terminologies first. So the first one we're going to talk about is what is a factor. With fractions, we're going to talk about factors. So here's the definition. If A times B equals C, then A and B are factors, there's that word, of C. Okay, so what exactly does that mean? Let me show you a couple of examples and I think it'll make more sense. If we have 6 times 2 equals 12, then the factors for this problem are 6 and 2, because we multiplied 6 by 2 and that gave us 12, which is exactly what it says up here in our definition. If A times B will give us C, then A and B are factors of C. Now, there's other things that equal 12. There's 3 times 4, which equals 12. So, factors of 12 are also 3 and 4. You can also do what is called a factor tree, and some of you may remember this from school, others of you probably have no idea what I'm talking about. But a factor tree is where you take the number that you're trying to figure out the factors, so 12 was our number from above, and then you think about, okay, what times what will give me 12? Well, just from above we know 6 times 2 will give me 12, or 3 times 4 will give me 12. So let's do 6 times 2 will give me 12. And then you look, does anything give you 2 besides 2 times itself? So that's the question you ask. What will give me the number besides 1 and itself? Okay, so does anything give you 2 besides 2 times 1? No, because it's a prime number. So then we have to look at 6. Well, is there anything that'll give us 6 besides 6 times itself? The answer is yes. So we do another little branch, and we have 3 times 2. Again, you'll ask yourself the same question. Is there anything that'll give you 3 besides 3 times 1? No, and we already know 2 is prime. So right here, we've done a factor tree, which means 3 times 2 times 2 will give us 12, which is true because we know this number right here is 6, and 6 times 2 gives us 12. So that's a really good way to really break down your numbers to see if you have any factors. And then your factors are the 3, the 2, and the other 2. Now that we understand what factors are, we can actually start talking about what a fraction is. A fraction is composed of 2 parts, and you have the numerator over the denominator. Now, a lot of people get these confused because numerator and denominator sound a lot alike. So if you have a hard time, remember that the D one is on bottom because that's where the dungeon is. Dungeons are down below. So you have your numerator and your denominator. So let's look at a fraction. Let's look at 3 over 5. So which one of these numbers is our numerator and which one of these is our denominator? Oops, that's a an M. Our numerator is the number that's on top, which will be our 3. Our denominator is the number that's on bottom, which will be our 5. These are important to understand when it comes time to simplifying fractions. So simplifying fractions is really the first thing that we're going to learn to do today. So let's define what that means. A fraction is simplified when the numerator and the denominator, so the top and the bottom, have no common factors besides 1. Simplified is also known as proper fraction. So if you have a simplified fraction, you have a proper fraction. Your homework will use proper fraction or simplified, so I just wanted to make sure you understood that that works either way. Okay, so let's see one. Actually, we're going to see 2. But let's look at the one we had already looked at, 3 over 5. So we have to think what times what gives me 3? And the answer to that is 3 times 1. Nothing else will give me 3. So then you have to do the same thing and think about what times what will give me 5. The only thing is 5 times 1. So if we're looking at these two numbers, do they have anything in common except for the number 1? The answer is no. So this is simplified. Okay, so that was an easy one. So let's do one where we actually have to do some math. So let's do 4 over 16. Again, we have to think what gives me 4 and what gives me 16. This is why I showed you that factor tree. Some people like to do the factor trees over doing just these side-by-side notes, and it's really a choice that you will have to make. But for now, we're going to do over here, and then I'll do the factor tree. So 4 is 2 times 2, and 16 is 4 times 4. So now either you can realize that, hey, that's a 4, and I had a 4 when I started, and those are similar and would work, or we can keep breaking it down. What I mean by that is if you realized early on, by just looking at the bottom, that we have 4 times 4 on the bottom, then we already have a 4 and a 4 in common, which means we could cancel those out, which would leave us with a 1 on top and a 4 on bottom. It's important to remember that there's a 1 on top because 4 is the same thing as 4 times 1. So if we cancel out that 4, we're going to be left with that 1. Okay? Now if you didn't realize that and we had to keep breaking it down, the factor trees are a little bit easier to do. And I will show you with factor trees. So 4, and then we'll have a factor tree of 16. So 4 we said was 2 times 2, and these don't break down anymore, so those are our factors. 16 breaks down into 4 times 4, and then each of those breaks down into 2 times 2 and 2 times 2. So those are the factors of 16. So here's the thing you have to realize. On the 4 side over here, we have 1, 2, and 2 2's. Over here, that we have in common, are those, which leaves us with what? It leaves us with these, which 2 times 2 is 4, thus our bottom number. It really depends on how you like to work. Some people can just do the fractions straight across. Some people like to do the trees. It really is going to be a choice that you have to make. I recommend doing it like we did that one. I will do another one so that you can see another example. So let's do another one. Let's do 15 over 21. Okay, so we have to think about what will give me 15. 5 times 3 will give me 15. And what gives me 21? 3 times 7. This is a good thing that we might need to go refresh ourselves on our times tables. And it's really, really recommended that you know all your times tables just by heart, because it'll take you a lot longer to do the problems if you have to punch them into your calculator. Okay, so we have 5 times 3, and we have 3 times 7. Is there anything on top that's the same as on bottom? The answer is yes. We have a 3 on top, and we have a 3 on bottom. So what does that leave us with? But a 5 and a 7. So 15 over 21 is the same thing as 5 over 7 when it's reduced. And that's how you simplify fractions. Okay, now we're going to talk about multiplying fractions. A lot of times when we talk about numbers, we think addition is going to be the easiest thing to do first, but multiplying fractions is actually easier to do. So we're going to give you the general form first, which is going to be all variables, and then we will show you how it actually works with numbers. So we have a over b, just some fraction, times c over d, another fraction. And all you're doing is you're multiplying the top numbers together, and then you're multiplying the bottom numbers together. So let's see an example of this. If we have 5 over 6 times 1 over 4. So what we're doing is we're taking 5 times 1 over 6 times 4. And that will give us a 5 on top and a 24 on bottom. Before you put that in, though, you have to make sure that there's nothing in common. There's nothing in common with our 5 and our 4 or our 6 and our 1, because we need to have a simplified fraction. And your homework will ask you for simplified fractions. And this is simplified. We're good to go. So let's see one that is not going to be simplified. So let's do another one. Let's do 1 over 2, so 1/2, times 2/3. Again, we're just taking the top numbers times each other and taking the bottom numbers times each other. Now at this point right here, we see, oh, we have a 2 on top and a 2 on bottom. So let's go ahead and cancel those out. And that'll just give us a 1 over 3. That's simplified. We're good to go. What if it's not quite that obvious, though? Let's do one more example. Excuse me. Let me get that over there. Example. Let's do 2 over 3 times 5 over 4. Okay, so we have 2 times 5 over 3 times 4. Now if we're just looking at numbers, 2, 3, 4, 5, none of those are the same number. But we need to remember that this 4 breaks apart into 2 2's. Okay, so we have 2 times 5 on top, but then we have 3, and instead of writing 4, let's write these 2 2's. We'll have 2 and a 2. Now is there anything that's the same on top as there is on bottom? Yes, we have 1, 2 on top, and we can cancel out 1, 2 on bottom. That leaves us with a 5 over 3 times 2, and that gives us a 5 over 6. There's nothing that's in common with a 5 or a 6. We have a simplified fraction. Okay? Now, you might not have realized that at this point, so that's why we have to watch our numbers really carefully so we can break them apart and cancel things out. When it comes to fractions, dividing fractions is going to be the next easiest thing after multiplication. So let's get the generic form out again. We're going to have A over B, and we're going to divide that by C over D. Now these always look really yucky, but they're not as bad as you think, because what you do for your next step, A over B, we're going to switch that sign to multiplication, and we're going to flip that second fraction. Notice there's now D over C, so you just have AD over BC. So you're going to change the sign to multiplication and flip the second fraction. Then just multiply. So really, division problems are simply multiplication problems. You just got to do that first extra step. So let's do an example of this. Let's do 3 over 5. Divide that by 5 over 6. Okay, don't try and do any type of simplifying yet. We gotta multiply first. So we gotta switch this. So we're leaving that first one alone, 3 over 5. Switch that to multiply. We're gonna flip this second one. So instead of 5 over 6, we now have 6 over 5. Okay, 3 times 6 over 5 times 5. Is there anything that we can cancel out there? Nope. So that equals 18 over 25. All right. So let's try maybe a harder one. Let's do one with a whole number. Whole numbers can seem tricky, but they're really not as bad as you think. Let's do 3 over 8. And let's divide that by the whole number 12. Okay, you might be looking at this and thinking that's not a fraction. So when you're dealing with whole numbers, simply place them over 1. So we have 12, let's put a 1 below it. Now we have 12 over 1. If you think about it, 12 divided by 1 is still going to be 12, so that's okay to do. Okay, what that allows us to do is whenever we change the sign to multiplication and we flip it, now we have 1 over 12. We can work with that. That's okay. So you have 3 over 1 times 8 times 12. Okay, now we have to look. Okay, is there a 3 down below? No. But what about this 12? What does that 12 break down into? Remember, 12 breaks down into 3 times 4. Oh, there's a 3. So let's go ahead and separate that out. 8 times, and then instead of putting 12 in, we're going to put in this 3 times 4. 3 times 4. Cancel out those 3's. So you just have 1 on top. 8 times 4. 32. And there you go. So we just divided a fraction by a whole number, which in turn we flipped, multiplied, and did as a multiplication problem. Okay, now we have to look at adding and subtracting fractions. We just did multiplication, we did division, so now we got to learn how to just add and subtract them. So let's do the generic. We have A over C plus B over C, and all we're going to do then is we're going to take A plus B over C. Notice though, the big thing here is the bottoms are the same. It's very important that the bottoms are the same. Okay, so likewise, if you have A over C minus B over C, we're going to get A minus B over C. Again, the bottoms have to be the same. So, let's do an example. if we have 3 over 5 plus 1 over 5, notice the bottoms are the same, so we can add these. That'll give us 3 plus 1 over 5, which will give us 4 over 5. We are good to go with that. Okay, so that one's good. Let's do one more. What if we had, let's do 2 over 9 plus 1 over 9. Bottoms are the same, so that's okay. We have 2 plus 1 over 9, which gives us 3 over 9. We did the addition part, we're good to go? Or is there something that needs to be simplified? What times what will give us 9? Think about that. We have 3 and 3. Oh, there's a 3 on top. So let's take this one step further. We have 3 over 3 times 3. Mark out that 3 on top. Remember, it's 3 times 1. Mark out the 3 on bottom. We're left with 1 over 3. So just because you're adding doesn't mean you might not have to simplify. So we need to make sure and check it's simplified. Okay, so you have to make sure it's all simplified before you can actually put it in, because if you put in 3 over 9 as an answer in your homework, it's going to count it as wrong. You have to make sure and put a simplified answer down. Okay, so this was adding and subtracting where the bottoms were the same. Obviously this is math. Math is going to get harder, so what do you do if the bottoms aren't the same? Well, that's what we're going to cover now. So, if the denominators we must get a common denominator. You're going to hear that word a lot, or those two words a lot. Common denominators are key. That just means they're going to be the same. Okay? So let's look at one. We have 1 over 2 plus 1 over 5. These don't have the same denominator. So the easiest way to get a common denominator, a CD, is to multiply the denominators. So for this problem, we have 1 over 2 plus 1 over 5. Our two denominators are 2 and 5. So we're going to multiply those to get a common denominator. That gives us 10. Okay, so 10 is going to be our common denominator. Now, what did we multiply? Here's the question. Question to ask. What did we multiply 2 by to get 10? We multiplied 2 by 5, and that gave us our 10. So that means we have to take this whole thing right here and multiply it by 5. So we take 1 times 5 and 2 times 5, because that 2 times 5 is going to give us the 10. Okay? And so we have to take the same thing on top as we do on bottom. So that's plus. Now we got to do it for the second one. So the question's the same thing. Okay, the next question's the same question. We're just going to substitute in a number. The question is, what did we multiply 5 by to get 10? And the answer to that one is 2. So we have a 1 times 2 over a 5 times 2. Let's let's go ahead and simplify these a little bit. 5 times 1 is 5 over 10, because 2 times 5 is 10, plus 1 times 2, which is 2, over 10. Now, these bottoms are the same. It's a problem from just like the previous ones. So now we're just adding the top. We have 5 plus 2, which give us 7 over 10. And that's our final answer. This may look like a lot of steps. It does get quicker the more you do. Okay? Let's do one that has subtraction in it. Okay, we're going to scroll down, scroll down. Alright, so let's do another one. Let's do 6 over 15 minus 2 over 15. Oh, sorry, that's the one from previous. Let's not do that one. Oops. Let's not do that one because we want to learn how to do them without the same denominators. So let's do 2 over 3 minus 1 over 2. We need to get our CD, our common denominator. So we're going to take our bottoms, which are 3 and 2, and that'll give us 6. Okay. So to get 6, we had took 3 times 2, so that means we need to take 2 times 2 for 3 times 2 minus, right here on this bottom one we did 2 times 3, so that means we've got to take the top one by 3, 1 times 3. That'll give us 4 over 6 minus 3 over 6. So 4 minus 3 all over 6, that'll give us 1 over 6. Notice that one went a lot quicker because I didn't have to write out the steps first off, but you start thinking through, okay, I'm multiplying that and getting this, and multiplying this and getting this. Once you have the same number on bottom, you just do the sign that's in the middle. Now, notice the denominators only have to be the same when adding and subtracting. You don't have to get a common denominator whenever you're multiplying or dividing. Earlier we didn't have to do that, and that's okay. It's only when you're adding and subtracting that you have to get that common denominator. One final thing that you need to notice about adding and subtracting fractions is that you cannot cancel across the adding and subtracting sign. So these ones you can't cancel like that. Like here, if we try to do that, if we cancel the 2 and the 2 thinking, oh, they're just going to go away, that's going to leave us with 1 minus 1 over 3 minus, like, it just doesn't work. That is very, very bad. So you can only cancel whenever you're doing multiplication. Okay, this is okay. You can do that, and that'll give you 1 over 3. That's okay. This up here is bad. Okay, one of the very last topics we're going to talk about today is something called a mixed number. Some of your problems will ask you, there's a B in there. Some of your questions will ask you for a mixed number answer, and what this is a number with a whole number and a fraction. If you want a real world application, think of whenever you're making like your grandma's cookies and you have 1 1/3 cups of something. This is a mixed number. Again, there is a B in number. Okay, see, we have the whole part where we have 1 whole cup, but then we're going to also have a third of a cup. So what if we have to transfer this into something that's just a fraction? What you're going to do is we'll just do this problem, 1 1/3. You're going to multiply the whole number by the denominator. So multiply whole number, there's my number symbol, by the denominator. So this is step 1, which is 1 times 3, which gives us 3. Then add the numerator, which is the top number, to the answer above. So we got 3 up here. Now we have to look. Our numerator is 1, so we're going to add 1 to that, to the answer we got, which will give us 4. So step 3, place answer over the denominator. Again, writing this out might make it more confusing. Sorry, I ran out of room. Than just working the problem, but I wanted to make sure it was all written out step by step. So we have our answer, which is 4. Now we're going to place it over the denominator. The denominator was 3. So we have 4 over 3. Notice this number on top is bigger than the bottom number. This is called an improper fraction. So let me write out the definition to an improper fraction for you. An improper fraction is a fraction where the numerator is greater than the denominator. So some of your problems will ask you to put it in improper fraction form, which will look like this, where the top number is bigger than the bottom. If it asks you for simplified, then this is not simplified. Simplified would be previous. It'd be the 1 1/3. That's when it's going to ask you for a mixed number. Most of your numbers will not be improper fractions. You're going to really have to read the instructions on your homework, and I'll work through a problem here in just a minute with you on that so that you understand. But first, let's do a couple of conversions, going from mixed numbers to improper fractions and back. So we just did a mixed number to an improper fraction, so let's do an improper fraction to a mixed number. Okay, here's an example. We have 7 over 6. 7 is bigger than 6, so we know that this is an improper fraction. Now we have to get it to a mixed number. So your step 1 is to take numerator, take the top number, divided by the bottom. Okay, long division, like old school, grade school division, is going to be the easiest way to do this to show you how this works. So we're taking our numerator and we're going to divide it by our denominator. So how many times does 6 go into 7? It goes in 1 time. 1 times 6 will give us 6. And then remember, when I redo this, you are subtracting these numbers. So 7 minus 6 leaves us with 1 left over. So we have a 1 on top. That's our whole number. This is our whole number. So there's our 1, and then we have 1 left over. So you're going to stick that over your 6. So step 2, is take the remainder and put it over the denominator. So 7/6 is the same thing as 1 1/6. And we did that by doing the division, coming up with the remainder and sticking the remainder over our denominator. Let's do another one. I know that might have been a lot to take in all at once, so let's do another example. Let's do 5/3. This is an improper fraction, so we need to convert it. So we're going to take 5 and divide that by 3. How many times does 3 go into 5? It goes in once. 1 times 3 will give us 3. We're going to subtract that from our 5. We're left with 2. Does 3 go into 2? No, 3 is bigger. So remember, this is our whole number, so we have a whole number of 1. Then we're taking this one and placing it over our 3. So we have 2/3. So there's our mixed number. Let's do another one where we went from mixed number to fraction. Just so we remember, let's do one with a 2 out front. We have 2 3/4. So this time we're trying to go to the improper fraction side. So remember, the first step is 2 times 4. And that gives us 8. Then we're going to take the 8 and we're going to add the top number, add the numerator. So that gives us 11. We're going to place that 11 over our original denominator, 11/4, and that is our answer. So you take 2 times 4, you add in the 3, that gives us the 11, and we place it over the original denominator. That's a mixed number to an improper fraction. Okay, now let's work some of your homework problems. If you get online and get on your Course Compass site, it's going to look something like this. So what you want to do is you want to click your homework button, and once it loads up, which may take a minute, continue. What you're going to do is you're going to click homework 1.3. Click OK. Oops, I've already attempted it, that's the problem. So if you've already attempted it, it'll show you, hey, you've already done problem 1, hey, you've done problem 9, but you can just click on any problem and it'll start you from there. You can go back and reattempt your homework as many times as you'd like, so I really recommend doing that, especially when it comes time for studying. Okay, so here's a simplify the fraction problem. I will go ahead and do this one with you. This one is on your homework. It's number 2. I have the same homework that you do. So we have 2/6. Remember, to simplify a problem or a fraction, you're thinking what times what will give me these numbers. So you have 2 times 1 in the bottom. Think about your little factor tree if you'd like over here. We have 6, and we have 2 times 3. So that'll give us 2 times 3, 3, not 2. So we have 2 and 2, which leaves us with 1/3. Okay, so on your homework, there's actually more than one way to put this in. We can just do 1, and on your keypad, you can type in over 3, and that will work. Or, if you don't like that, there's these little buttons over here on the side. You can click the multiplication, or excuse me, the fraction button, and then type in your top number, go down and type in your bottom number, hit enter. Hey, we got it right. Good job. Okay, one of them that I wanted to do with you was a word problem. So there is a word problem on this homework, and we have Debbie Anderson cuts a piece of wood measuring 2 7/8 inches into 2 equal pieces. How long is each piece? Okay, so on this you have to think a little bit on what the problem is asking. So what is the problem asking? And what it says is we have a piece of wood We have one piece of wood, and that whole piece of wood measures 2 7/8 inches long. That whole thing measures that. And we need to cut it into 2 pieces. So we need to cut it in half. We need to go dot, 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 dot is what we need to do. So are we adding? So here's the question. Are we adding, subtracting, multiplying, or dividing? The answer is going to be dividing. We're dividing. We're cutting this thing into 2, so we're dividing it into 2 pieces. Okay? So what we're doing, let me pull it up just a little bit and straighten it out for you. What we're doing is we're taking 2 7/8 and we're dividing that by 2. So we have more than one problem going on here. We have mixed numbers, and then we have division. So let's do one thing at a time. First, let's change the mixed number to a fraction. Okay, so we're only going to do that part right now. We have 2 7/8. So we have 2 times 8, which gives us 16. Then we need to add the top number, which is 7, which will give us our 23. And we're going to put the 23 over the original denominator, so then we have 23/8. And we're going to divide that by 2. Okay? So now we have to remember, okay, that's a whole number, so we're going to put it over 1 in order to do this division. So we have 23/8. And when you're dividing, we're going to switch that to multiplying and flip the second one. So that'll be 1/2. So you have 23 times 1/8 times 2. So 23/16. Okay, so that's our answer. Each of these pieces is going to measure 23/16 inches. But let's look at our problem. Our problem says we need to type a whole number, a proper fraction, or a mixed number. This right now is improper. So we have to fix that. We have to change that into a mixed number. Okay, so now we got to go backwards. Remember, when we're changing from a improper fraction to a mixed number, we're taking the numerator and we're dividing that by our denominator. Okay, this one's a little bit harder because it's 16. 16 is kind of a big number. So over on the side, you might want to think, okay, 16 times 1 is 16, and 16 times 2 is 32. If you don't know that, you can type that in your calculator. Okay, but that's really as far as you have to go because 16 times 2 is 32. 32 is bigger than 23, so we know we're not going to have to deal with that one. So we just need 16 times 1. Which is 16. We're going to subtract that out of our 23, which will leave us with 7. And then does 16 go into 7? No, 16 is bigger than 7. So here's our whole number, 1. And then we're going to put the 7/16. So this is our final answer. This is the answer we have to put in to the course compass site. So let's see if we can figure that out. Oops, sorry, my paper slid. So let's put that in. Here's our answer piece. We need to put in a mixed number. And if you look over here on the side, we have fractions. And look, if you let your mouse dangle, it even says mixed number. So let's click the mixed number one. And we have a 1 and 7/16. That looks like the same mixed number we wrote down on our paper. Let's hit enter. We got the right answer. So there are a few word problems in here. They're going to be ones like this, okay, where you're just going to be deducing what it says to do. Now let's say you didn't quite understand that problem. There's this miraculous button down here called similar exercise. And you can hit that button, hit similar exercise, and look, our whole thing changed. Not really, really just the numbers changed. The 2 1/8 changed because we were dealing with 2 7/8. So now we have a whole new problem that we can figure out and we rework it so that we have more practice. I really recommend doing that because it allows you the opportunity to really practice and hone in on your skills. Well, that's the end of section 1.3. You have covered all of your goals for today. We learned how to simplify fractions. We learned how to multiply, divide, add, and subtract fractions, and we learned how to mess around with mixed numbers. So good luck on your homework and on your quizzes.